Pro-Palestinian demonstrators have marched in huge numbers in cities and towns right across the country yesterday, all with one message: to end the war in Gaza. Now, early estimates suggest around 300,000 people took part in the nationwide March for Palestine, all sparked from a rally on the Sydney Harbour Bridge several weeks ago.
They keep marching and their message gets louder. Protesters from more than 40 Australian cities and towns coming together, showing there's power in the masses and that actions speak louder than words. In Sydney, more than 100,000 protesters took to the city's CBD. The New South Wales Central Coast, Newcastle and Katoomba also holding their own rallies.
You can see there's massive pressure on the Albanese government now after the historic march over the Sydney Harbour Bridge we held. Now there's just this huge tidal wave of people coming out in, as we said, over 40 cities and towns, little places that haven't had protests before. So this is like massive now, that the huge bulk of the Australian population are demanding an end to this genocide and demanding real action.
Brisbane's march of almost 50,000 people began at Queen's Gardens across Victoria Bridge, following a court's ruling to block the initial plan across the Story Bridge. Across Queensland, protesters also took to the streets of Townsville, Coffs Harbour and Mackay.
All up in 2024, the Australian government allowed Australia to export nearly $50 million of military equipment or be used by the armed forces just in 2024. Just in the 12 months after the ICJ said that there was a genocide or a plausible genocide going on in Gaza.
Close to 100,000 demonstrators gathered outside Victoria's State Library in Melbourne, and Canberra's Civic Square had close to 2,000 people attend, with over 4,000 marching in Hobart. In our west, Perth had close to 20,000 rally. Organisers also saying protests were held in Broome, Albany, Karratha and Margaret River, with the number there well into the thousands.
Became friends with people in Palestine who were trying to get their stories out, and through that have lost friends. Those connections I've made, they don't exist anymore.
Which is a war crime. It needs to be ceasefire.
We became involved because we're concerned about the children. We want to help the children of Gaza.
People are coming out in their tens of thousands, the largest protests we've ever seen, and we're all united with the message that the Australian government must impose sanctions on Israel now.
Hortensia Beret, Sky News.
Well, joining me live is Nationals leader David Littleproud. Good morning. Your reaction to this?
Oh, look, I respect any Australian's right to assemble and to protest. I want the war in the Middle East, in Palestine, to cease as well. But let's get back to first principles. This war was perpetrated by an act of terrorism by a terrorist organisation, Hamas. They crossed the border and executed, tortured, raped and took hostage Israeli citizens. It is beholden on the Israeli government to eradicate that threat and to bring their citizens home. That hasn't happened. And Hamas can solve this immediately. They can lay down their arms and they can hand back the hostages. And I don't think if this was the same situation here in Australia, that we would see Australians marching against the Australian government if they were trying to bring home their citizens and eliminate a threat of a terrorist organisation. And this is where the Albanese government has just made a meal of international relationships, our diplomatic relationship with Israel and the United States, by recognising Palestine before we have a proper Palestinian Authority. They haven't had an election for over 20 years. Hamas is controlling the place. Until they're eradicated, then we are going to be repeating the mistakes of the past, and they will come back, Hamas, and they will perpetrate hate in that region. So we all want to see what happens, but you need to want to see peace. But what we want to see is an understanding of the situation that's there and the realistic situation. And until we get Hamas to lay down their guns and hand back those Israeli hostages, the Israeli government has a responsibility to bring its citizens home. And I think this is where we need to understand that it is a complex situation, more complex than what we can appreciate.
David, you're right. It is complex. And I want to preface this by saying that on the whole, the protest, I was at the Melbourne protest yesterday covering it. They were on the whole very peaceful. But a couple of things that concerned me that I witnessed yesterday, there were antagonists within the crowd. There's so much hostility towards the media. I was verbally abused by several men yesterday, told that I'm lucky to be a journalist in Australia, not in Gaza. I mean, thousands were chanting through the city. Our leaders nowhere to be seen. One lady was banging on the window of a cafe, chanting and saying horrible things to people nearby. I saw little kids coming out of the theatre. They were scared by what they were seeing as well. But it was Anthony Albanese that they were targeting their anger towards, despite Palestinian recognition. My concern is, where does this leave us now? Because it feels like there's more division.
Yeah, and this hate, I fear, is being imported into Australia. This is a conflict that should stay in the Middle East. It should be resolved in the Middle East, and I hope that it's resolved quickly. But we don't want that hate perpetrated on the streets of our capital cities, nor, I think, should we forget about the hate that has been perpetrated on the Jewish community going to worship at their place of worship, a synagogue, that they don't feel safe, that we've seen fire bombings. That's not the Australia that I grew up in, and that's not the Australia I want to leave behind. I don't think it matters what your religion is. You should be able to go and worship that with peace and safety. And when you've lost control of the streets, it's because of the leadership of this country has been lacking. After the 7th of October, we saw hate permeate out of the mouths of imams on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. The Prime Minister didn't announce that. He didn't set the tone immediately about what the expectation is in this country. You can worship a faith in this country, and you can do it peacefully. And the Prime Minister has let this get away, and he's destroyed our relationship with Israel and wrecked the United States relationship, which puts us at broader risk around AUKUS and trade, all because of a lack of leadership. Now, I think we need to understand that there needs to be strong leadership, and that people out there that want to go and protest, they can do it, but if they don't do it peacefully, there's got to be a consequence for them in not doing that. And so this is where the Prime Minister missed the opportunity, and it's gotten away from him, and unfortunately it's set the tone in this nation to a level that I don't think I've seen in my life.
David, just on the US relationship there that you mentioned, of course Richard Marles is heading over to the US. What are you hoping to see there?
Well, obviously we hope that the Deputy Prime Minister can forge our interest. The Prime Minister can't get a meeting with President Trump, and I think the Deputy Prime Minister is going to push our case around AUKUS. It's important. AUKUS is not just about submarines, it's a strategic partnership. When we're relying on Virgin pilots to identify warships in waters off Australia doing live fire exercises, something's not right. We don't have the capacity ourselves. We need to increase our investment in our defence, but we need the strategic partnerships that will back us in our hour of need and send strong strategic messages to any strategic threat that we can defend ourselves, and we'll have allies on our shoulder that will help us. And that's been a diplomatic failure by Anthony Albanese. I mean, if you remember back, hark your mind back to Macron having a go at Prime Minister Albanese and his attack on Scott Morrison's diplomatic endeavours. Well, I don't think the Prime Minister has covered himself in glory either between Israel or the United States since the election. And it's important that there's some leadership there, because this strategic partnership is so important to our nation's future and our security.
Mm-hmm. Okay, David, we've run out of time, but just some quick thoughts, just one line if you can. Labor's move to fast-track this deposit scheme?
Oh, well, look, it's an election promise, but it's not addressing the issue, which is supply. You need to increase supply, and we need state and local governments to unlock that supply, but federal governments to have proper migration policies, an immigration policy that works for Australia, the right number of people, but the right skills, not prioritising dog groomers and martial arts instructors, but maybe some chippies, some plumbers and electricians might help us build that supply by bringing some of those skills in. That's just common sense. At the moment, they're tinkering at the edges.